This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. So the Browns wrapped up joint practice yesterday with the Buffalo Bills, and that serves as an interesting marker for this team in their prep to get ready for the start of the 2026 season. There's some things that we're learning about the quarterback competition. There's some things that we're learning about the young players on this team. There's a lot of things that we're going to be learning a lot about over the next week as this team goes from off-season Browns to the 2026 Browns, right? And they start to make that transformation over the next week, which would be a lot more focused. But what I want to talk about is what's looking good so far about this Browns team, because you can get caught up in so much of the discourse about this team that you forget that there's a lot of things that are going right for the Cleveland Browns right now. They're just not at the position that everybody is talking about. So let's do that today. Let's put a big old spotlight on the things that are looking good so far, the things that we have enjoyed about the Browns camp so far, and the things that project hopefully success for this team in the future. But before I do that, got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 sports app. The app is really easy to use for player picks. Just pick more or less for a few player stats and lock in your lineup. That's it. Rather just pick teams, well, PrizePicks has that now too. Just pick the winner, spread, or total in any game or fight. PrizePicks is available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida. Plus, you can even follow me on the app at Quinn_C and tell my picks with one click and follow your friends too. Speaking of my picks, here they are. Myles Garrett over 15.75 sacks. 16's been his baseline the last few years. I'd be very surprised if he goes to LA and that number drops, given that he's going to see more passing attempts, given that LA's offense is better than what the Browns have been. Quincy Judkins, 924 yards. They had two really good picks for Quincy here, 6 touchdowns or 924 yards. I feel comfortable taking more on both, but 1,000 yards feels like a safer bet for Quincy. I think he's going to have a big year this year. Carson Schlesinger, 2.25 sacks. I'm saying more. Remember, Mike Rutenberg likes to blitz his linebackers a lot more than the previous defensive coordinator the Cleveland Browns had. Also, Carson Schlesinger is probably going to have to get involved as a sack producer to make up for the hole that they're going to have to make up for Myles Garrett. And then Shedeur Sanders starting more than 7.5 games. I think he'll be the starter, play about 8 games or more this year, but that's my picks for this season. Best of all, play your first $5 and get $150 in lineups if you win. Just use the promo code HMA when you sign up. Again, that's your first $5 and get $150 in lineups if you win when you use the promo code HMA. PrizePicks has switched up their offer. There's no better time to join, lock in, and win that first lineup. Okay, so any conversation about this year's camp that starts with the word good is gonna hover around the two names that I think have dominated training camp this year. And those two names are Denzel Boston and Casey Concepcion. Every video I've done covering Browns camp, covering OTAs, mini camps, it's the same thing. It's Casey Concepcion, it's Denzel Boston. And that's the room that the Browns made their biggest bet on in the draft, right? They spent 2 premium assets, a early second and a late first, on these two guys to be the base, to be the anchor of this wide receiver room. With Casey Concepcion, the plan is crystal clear. I always talk about this with draft prospects. It's important that you like the prospect, but it's not the most important thing, right? Whether you love the prospect individually. The most important thing when your favorite team drafts somebody is, does your team have a clear path and vision for this athlete? Is there a role that they envision this guy playing that is easily identifiable? And with Casey Concepcion, that was very clear. what the plan was from day one, which is Todd Monken wants to do with Casey Concepcion what he did with Zay Flowers in Baltimore. I think Zay Flowers is actually, ironically enough, the first round pick in Todd Monken's first year. Somebody fact checked me on that, but I think he got there right when Todd got there, right? So Todd, in the same position, hired to fix an offense, goes for Casey Concepcion, who is very similar to Zay Flowers, except for he's much bigger. And it seems like that's the plan for Casey Concepcion. And when you give a young player a real path and plan for success, a template, if you will, then that player has a much better chance of being successful. Whether you like their tape or not, whether you personally scouted them yourself and you like what you saw or not, right? Again, those things are secondary. The most important thing for me when I'm grading a draft, especially when we don't know the outcome, it's not where I had this guy on my board. It's, okay, what does this guy do well? And what's the plan for him? Is there a plan? You look at bad draft picks, no plan. You can't tell a plan for him, right? Siaki Ika is like the famous example of this, where I was like completely out on a draft pick because I did not like the prospect. And then I heard the plan for Siaki Ika, and I was like, oh, that's even worse, right? Because the plan for Siaki Ika was to get him to lose weight and play him at 3-tech. And I'm like, maybe it could work if you put him at nose, right, given his skill set. But 3-tech's a horrible fit for him. And that ended predictably, right? You can like a player sometimes, and there's plenty of players I've liked where the fit was awful, right? There are players that I've liked in the draft. They come here, the fit's not right. Jamari Thrash. I like Jamari Thrash in the pre-draft, but hey, the fit's not right. It hasn't worked out here in Cleveland. It's about the plan, right? So regardless of if you were personally pounding the pavement for Casey Concepcion or not, the thing that gave me the most confidence in that pick was the fact that Todd Monken's here and he has a clear template for this guy to be successful. And he's installing that template on Casey Concepcion. The same thing is happening with Denzel Boston, right? Denzel Boston is operating a very similar space in his offense that DeAndre Hopkins operated for the Baltimore Ravens while Todd Monken was there. Again, you draft a guy, you have a plan for him, and then you have plans to expand it, right? But you have a plan for this guy to be successful. You know what this guy does well. You have a pathway for his success. That is why I've liked the last two draft classes so much from Andrew Berry. It's not that every player that they've taken is the player I would have taken in that spot based on the players I liked in pre-draft. No, it's because I like the plans and the fits for these players, right? Casey Concepcion was already a really strong fit selection, and then you add Denzel Boston, it's like, bam, perfect, right? Because now you're not asking Casey Concepcion to get 50-50 balls in the end zone. You got Denzel Boston for that, right? One player complements the weaknesses of another player, and the other player complements the strengths of the other player, right? That is good drafting. That's why I'm high on the 2026 class, and I was high on the 2025 class. We're seeing that with Casey Concepcion. He's being put in that role to be successful. Denzel Boston is being put in a role to be successful where we're not asking him to do things that he never did before. We're just asking him to do what he does already really well, and then we're going to expand that as he goes forward. Both of these players have been set up for success. They've been drafted with a plan in mind. This is the thing about Andrew Berry that I do like. When he drafts players, there's a process behind it, and as he's been GM longer, that process has gotten better. And I think they've gotten it to a really nice place. Spencer Fano, he's been part of what looks good so far, but that's going to be a larger conversation about the offensive line. We've talked about the young wide receivers, and they've been impressive. Isaiah Bond is another name that I didn't get time to talk about here, but there's a clear plan for Isaiah Bond. He seems to be filling that role really well so far, so you're excited about what you're seeing there with Isaiah Bond too. But let's talk about this offensive line, because from a pass protection standpoint, I think that we've seen some really good things. Run blocking is going to have to be in a different video, unfortunately, but from a pass protection standpoint, they are pretty good at this point, right? Like, I wouldn't say they're going to be one of the best offensive lines in football, but I do think they're going to be significantly better this year from a pass protection standpoint, no matter what point of the year we're talking about, because it does seem like that part is already showing itself is much better. Spencer Fano is much further along at this point than I thought he would be. He looks very natural at left tackle. Even when he gets beat, it's not because of the things that physically you had concerns about, right? His length and stuff like that. It's really just him just learning lessons. So there's that. I think Spencer Fano's been good. I think that the rest of the offensive linemen, when they've been out there, have been good. They just had joint practice with the Buffalo Bills, and it sounds like they held up pretty well versus the Buffalo Bills. So from a pass protection standpoint, I think that the Browns are at a pretty good place. I think it's going to hold up quite well. They got some veterans in there, some young players, and I think that's something that we should not take for granted, because think about all the turnover on this offensive line. Think about everything that's changed on this offensive line. Like, really just think about it, right? Everybody who's playing right now was on a different football team last year. Not one of these guys were Cleveland Browns last year, right? You got Spencer Fano, who was playing at Utah last year. Zion Johnson was playing with the Chargers. Elgin Jenkins was playing with the Green Bay Packers. The only guy who was in Cleveland last year, my bad, is Tevin Jenkins, right? Tevin Jenkins was in Cleveland last year. He was not starting, but he did outplay Wyatt Teller at the end of the year. And then at right tackle, we got Titus Howard, who was on the Houston Texans. None of these guys were on the same team last year. All of these guys are learning this offense for the first time together. Some of them are learning the NFL for the first time. Some of them are playing in Todd Monken's system, or a system like Todd Monken's, for the first time. All of them are playing with the guys next to him for the first time. And they haven't had much practice time together, but when they've been out there, the pass protection has been good. That's great. That's a great baseline to work from, right? Like, you look at like buying a house or something like that, right? When you look around at a house, one of the things people are going to say is, hey, it has good bones. That means that the way the house is built is something that I could be happy with, so that all I really have to do is fix up some cosmetic things and put some furniture in here. I'm going to like the house, right? Like, there's still a lot of work to do on the house, but I don't think I have to tear down a bunch of walls. I don't think I have to reconfigure the whole layout. I don't think I have to change where the staircases are or add a new bathroom. The bones are fine, right? That's what it means when somebody says it has good bones. The offensive line has good bones, it seems. Doesn't seem like we're going to have to switch out new players. Maybe adjust a player playing one position and then slide another player to a different position, maybe put Parker Brailsford in at some point during the year. But all we really got to do is just get these guys to get more time with each other. And I think the talent is there for these guys to be good. One thing that's going under the radar, man, Zion Johnson's been good. Like, he was good when he played in the preseason. He's been good in joint practice. He's been good in practice. Like, have you really heard of anybody complaining about Zion Johnson at all? And he's the guy that they make the biggest bet on in free agency. I don't think people have really thought about this as much, right? But Zion Johnson was a former first-round pick. He's 26 years old. And the Browns signed him with the hopes that, like, they can figure something out with him, put him in a situation to be successful, and then get him to become and live up to that potential of that first-round pick. And so far, if there's one offensive lineman we have not heard anything about, and this is good when you're on the offensive line, because usually when you're getting talked about and you're not a top 10 draft pick, it's because you're doing something wrong, is Zion Johnson. So, nice, right? Like, that's a good sign to be at. I think the run game's going to have a lot to work on. There's going to be a separate video where I talk about the things that I think the Browns need to be a little concerned about at this point. But so far, pass protection on the offensive line, it's going to be there. And look, we all know that the quarterback situation is what it is. But when both of these quarterbacks play, and they both will play more than likely, they're going to have enough around them to be able to definitively be like, hey, man, this guy's just not that good. If that's the case, right? Shador does not have the wide receivers and offensive line to point to for reasons why he could not be successful. I don't think that's going to be a legitimate reason. The same is true for Deshaun Watson. So if these guys fail, they fell on their own merit. But also, that means if they do fail and you need to replace them, which is likely, you're a good spot for a guy to be able to land, whether it be a veteran or a rookie. So that's another thing about the Browns I think they're at a good place with. Let's talk about the defense real quick here, right? Because I think the defense was another thing that's under the microscope, given all the changes that they had, right? The Browns lost Myles Garrett. And look, it looks like that's going to hurt them in the edge room. Not just because they don't have Myles Garrett and they have Jared Verse, but also because the Browns are just experiencing a lot of injuries on the defensive line right now, like untimely injuries. The top end of the Browns defense has not gotten injured, and I think that's the fortunate thing. So like Mason Graham and Jared Verse are okay. But all the things underneath them have collapsed, right? So like we haven't had Malik Collins in practice. I think that was expected though. But like the depth of the defensive tackle has been completely ravaged during training camp. The depth of edge has been ravaged during training camp. Corner depth has been ravaged during training camp. So the depth of the Browns is certainly being tested, but the top end is still very strong. And what you might not have in raw ability from Myles, you do have in the intangibles that Jared Verse brings to this team. And it does seem like that is mattering for this defense, right? Like they are playing with a different edge, a different mentality with Jared Verse as part of the vocal leadership, which is something that they did not have, right? We talked about this last year. It was like, hey, if Myles isn't going to be the leader, which I thought was okay, right? Myles doesn't have to be the leader of the team if that's not what he's naturally inclined to do. Somebody else needs to step up. And a lot of us thought maybe Carson Schlesinger could step up in that role. And it seems like he's going to be a leader for this team, certainly. But like also like Denzel Ward was one of the best players on this defense, not really a vocal leader either. They needed somebody who could hold one of those roles of being one of the best players on this defense while also being able to be a vocal leader for this team. And Jared Verse has held that down quite nicely. He's been one of the best players on the defense. He's been a very vocal leader. Obviously, you have to worry about the concerns of not having Myles on this defense and being a little thin defensively. But I do think that if they stay healthy, this should be a really good defense. And we talked about this. The Browns' formula to win games this year, it's real simple, right? It's the same formula that has worked year in and year out for teams that don't necessarily anticipate great quarterback play. And that formula is simple. Play great defense, have a good run game, have good special teams when it comes to field goal kicking. If you can get those three things aligned, good punting is a plus too. But if you can have those good three things aligned, if you could be solid in those three areas, then you have a shot to win some games this year. Not like a ton of games. You're not going to get the 1 seed in the AFC. You might not even get to the playoffs or out of third place of your division. But you will be a much more respectable team than you were last year. And I think that's the goal. The goal is simply to watch this team play and watch them be better than they were last year. And if they can do that, mind you, while they already lost Myles, right? So if you can say that the Browns are better than they were in 2025, even though they lost Myles Garrett, that is an excellent place to be at. The record might not be what everybody wants it to be. It might not be over 500, but it will be an improvement and something that they can work with. Remember, the Denver Broncos went 8-9 the year before they drafted Bo Nix. And then they got 10-7, 13-3. They have exceeded expectations since they've drafted their quarterback. But before they got their guy, they were under 500, right? The Minnesota Vikings are very talented, but they don't have a quarterback. So they were 8-9 last year. And now they're experimenting with Kyler Murray. We'll see where that takes them, right? When they had Sam Darnold with that same roster, they won 13 games. The Browns are in a similar place, or at least the Browns are trying to get to a similar place. And if we can end this season saying, hey, we feel great about everything but quarterback, and we feel like if a quarterback comes here, they have a chance to be successful. That's not a bad thing at all. That's actually a really positive thing. So that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts so far in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.